For 3 decades, The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson, was the crown jewel of American television. From 1962 until Carson's retirement in 1992, the show transformed late-night entertainment, bringing a mix of comedy, celebrity interviews, and cultural commentary to millions of Americans across the country. Carson's charm was undeniable. His warm smile, effortless humor, and uncanny ability to make guests feel at ease created the illusion of intimacy, as though viewers were sitting in on a private conversation in their own living rooms. Audiences didn't just watch the show, they trusted Johnny, and in turn, they trusted the carefully curated image of Hollywood he presented each night. Yet, beneath the surface of laughter and applause, Carson maintained a personal ledger, an unspoken blacklist of guests who, despite their public personas, exhibited behaviors he found utterly intolerable. For Carson, television was more than performance. It was a window into character. He had a keen ability to discern between the polished public image of a celebrity and the raw, sometimes disturbing realities that lurked behind closed doors. His assessments were not superficial or gossip-driven. They were grounded in observation, interactions, and decades of immersion in the high-stakes world of Hollywood. This was a world where glamour often masked cruelty, charm camouflaged manipulation, and immense talent could coexist with moral bankruptcy. Carson's approach to celebrity interviews was deceptively simple. On camera, he was genial, witty, and endlessly patient, fostering an atmosphere that coaxed stories out of even the most reserved stars. Off camera, however, he was acutely observant. Crew members, producers, and assistants often witnessed him quietly take stock of a guest's behavior, noting patterns, reactions, and treatment of the people around them. The result was a mental scorecard that informed his private judgments and, in some cases, his decisions regarding future bookings. Carson's blacklist wasn't publicized, and for good reason. It was less about punitive action and more about a moral compass that guided his interactions with those who walked onto his stage. Joan Crawford, the cold Hollywood queen. When Joan Crawford appeared on The Tonight Show in 1970, audiences expected a vision of old Hollywood glamour. Crawford's impeccable posture, radiant beauty, and carefully cultivated charm projected the image of a refined and gracious legend. Viewers admired her poise and charisma, never imagining the icy calculation behind the smile. Behind the cameras, the story was different. Crawford's legendary perfectionism and mercurial temperament manifested in ways that were both exacting and cruel. According to several members of Carson's team, Crawford's demands began long before she stepped into the studio. She required exacting lighting specifications, precise chair and desk arrangements, and a studio temperature maintained to the decimal, never too warm, never too cold. Her makeup team was scrutinized. Despite the program already employing highly skilled professionals, but what truly revealed Crawford's character was not her obsession with aesthetics. It was her treatment of those deemed subordinate. A young production assistant, tasked with delivering water to Crawford's dressing room, inadvertently crossed a line in the star's eyes. Witnesses described an explosion of verbal aggression, with Crawford allegedly berating the assistant in language so cutting that hallway staff were frozen in shock. She reportedly demeaned the young woman, suggesting her incompetence might be better suited for a brothel, and demanding her immediate dismissal. When Carson's producer refused to comply, tension simmered throughout the recording. Despite the chaos behind the scenes, Crawford transformed instantly for the cameras, her rehearsed smiles and gestures presenting the exact persona viewers expected. Carson, adept at reading human nature, saw through the performance. To him, Crawford's charisma was mechanical, each laugh and anecdote meticulously choreographed. Years later, when Christina Crawford published Mommy Dearest, revealing allegations of abuse by her mother, Johnny reportedly did not express surprise. Instead, he quietly confirmed what he had perceived. A brilliant public figure whose private conduct was deeply troubling. For Carson, Crawford represented the chilling precision with which fame could obscure cruelty. She was a cautionary tale of how the veneer of stardom could mask cold, calculating behavior. Frank Sinatra. The intimidating charisma. In contrast to Crawford's calculated coldness, Frank Sinatra embodied a different kind of menace, one that combined immense talent with an aura of raw, sometimes frightening authority. On camera, Sinatra was charming, witty, and engaging, bantering effortlessly with Carson and sharing anecdotes that enchanted audiences. Off camera, however, the singer's presence could be intimidating, even threatening, to the Tonight Show staff. Sinatra frequently arrived with a small entourage that reportedly included men not connected to the entertainment industry, described as having the appearance and demeanor of enforcers rather than assistants. Their presence alone created a tense atmosphere in the studio, where crew members were acutely aware of the implicit power dynamic. This entourage wasn't simply ornamental, it was a subtle assertion of control and dominance, a reminder that Sinatra's influence extended far beyond the microphone. Beyond intimidation, Sinatra's unpredictability was legendary. He occasionally canceled appearances with mere hours' notice, disregarding the meticulous planning of the show's team. During one taping in the early 1970s, an assistant failed to alert Sinatra about a segment with the customary 3-minute notice. Witnesses recalled Sinatra physically grabbing the assistant by the collar, admonishing him for the slight, leaving the man visibly shaken. Carson, observing the incident from his office monitor, reportedly considered halting the segment entirely. The production team's reminder of Sinatra's audience draw persuaded him otherwise, though he maintained a private determination to limit future appearances. The singer's behavior highlighted the delicate balance Carson navigated nightly. He respected Sinatra's talent and acknowledged his cultural significance, yet he refused to condone mistreatment of those with less power. Sinatra, in essence, represented the darker side of celebrity authority, the capacity to charm millions on stage, while wielding fear and control behind the scenes. Carson's personal distaste for the behavior, combined with his ethical standards, meant that even the most revered stars were not immune to judgment in his eyes. Orson Welles, the disrespectful genius. Orson Welles was a titan of cinema, a visionary whose name evoked artistic brilliance. Yet beneath the genius, Carson and his staff encountered behavior that was often insufferable. Welles's appearances on The Tonight Show were legendary, not only for their charm on camera, but also for the chaos they left in their wake. On set, Welles's ego was immense. He treated the carefully crafted program not as a collaborative production, but as an extension of his own cinematic universe. Carson, a consummate professional and master of pacing, had meticulously structured segments to ensure a seamless experience. Welles, however, viewed these constraints as affronts to his creativity. Reports from crew members describe him sprawling on the iconic Tonight Show couch, commandeering the conversation, and extending segments well beyond the allotted time. Monologues became improvisational soliloquies, tangents about his films and philosophies stretching on endlessly, while audiences at home were captivated behind the cameras. Frustration simmered. Stage managers attempted subtle cues to bring him back on track, but Welles often ignored them, absorbed in his own storytelling. The tension peaked when Welles attempted to direct the program itself. Accounts from producers suggest he gave unsolicited instructions to lighting technicians, camera operators, and even Carson himself. "Move the lights over here. No, that angle is all wrong. You're cutting me off," Welles reportedly barked, his theatrical authority clashing with the rigid timing of live television. Carson, who valued both wit and discipline, found himself in a delicate dance. How to maintain control without humiliating a cultural icon in front of millions. Yet, despite the chaos, Carson's approach was measured. He allowed Wells his space, subtly steering the conversation while safeguarding the integrity of the show. Behind the scenes, however, Wells earned a place on Carson's informal blacklist, a recognition that brilliance did not excuse the derailing of others' work. Wells embodied a recurring pattern, genius intertwined with disregard for collaboration, a reminder that Hollywood's most revered figures could wield talent as a shield for disruptive behavior. Bette Davis, the explosive temperament. Bette Davis was Hollywood royalty, an actress whose talent was undeniable and whose screen presence radiated magnetism. On camera, she displayed elegance, poise, and a razor-sharp wit. Yet backstage, Davis carried a reputation for unpredictability and a volatile temper that left production teams on edge. Carson, who had interviewed numerous stars over decades, approached her appearance with both admiration and caution. According to insiders, Davis' charm quickly gave way to abrasiveness once cameras stopped rolling. She frequently interrupted producers and assistants, issuing orders without preamble or explanation. Her language, laced with insults and sometimes offensive slurs, left crew members navigating a minefield of temperament and historical attitudes. One anecdote recalls her responding to a technical glitch with a tirade that included a dismissive remark about ignorant kids and a jab at a young writer for not understanding her genius. Carson, skilled in handling volatile personalities, relied on a combination of patience, humor, and subtle redirection. On air, he maintained a polished, genial demeanor, allowing Davis's charisma to shine while ensuring the conversation remained digestible for viewers. Off-air, he made meticulous notes about her behavior, assessing the degree of unpredictability and potential risk to his team. Unlike Wells, whose disruptions were grandiose, Davis's conduct was sharply personal, often targeting individuals rather than the show itself. Her reputation for volatility was reinforced by colleagues' accounts, and it is likely that Carson, valuing harmony and respect behind the scenes, quietly opted to limit her future appearances. Davis's duality, brilliant performer, volatile human, highlighted one of Carson's key insights. Celebrity allure could mask deep interpersonal challenges. In the hierarchy of Hollywood legends, Davis reminded Carson that public admiration and private comportment did not always align. Her inclusion on the blacklist was less about punitive judgment and more about preserving the safety and morale of those who facilitated the magic of live television. Mickey Rooney, the troubled child. Star Mickey Rooney's story differed from the others, yet it was no less cautionary. A former child prodigy, Rooney rose to fame in the 1930s, captivating audiences with boundless energy, charm, and comic timing. By the time he appeared on The Tonight Show, however, he carried the weight of decades of personal turmoil, unresolved trauma, and the often destructive pressures of Hollywood stardom. Carson's staff observed Rooney's behavior as a blend of nostalgia and instability. On camera, Rooney could charm effortlessly, regaling the audience with recollections of vaudeville, early MGM films, and interactions with icons long gone. Yet behind the scenes, his conduct sometimes raised concerns. Accounts describe abrupt mood swings, confrontational interactions with assistants, and an insistence on controlling even minor aspects of production. While other stars wielded ego or authority, Rooney's behavior was often colored by unresolved insecurities and patterns of self-sabotage. During one rehearsal, Rooney reportedly refused to perform a pre-planned segment unless certain adjustments were made to the camera angles and lighting. Requests that, while not unreasonable, were delivered with such intensity that stagehands and producers struggled to comply in real time. His fame, built over decades, granted him leeway, but Carson and his team recognized that accommodating every whim risked chaos. Carson's response to Rooney was emblematic of his approach to troubled stars. He treated him with dignity and respect on air, acknowledging the brilliance that made him a legend, but privately noted the challenges of collaboration. Rooney's inclusion on the informal blacklist reflected a nuanced understanding. Sometimes a star's personal struggles, no matter how charismatic they appeared, created untenable conditions for the smooth operation of a live show. Carson, ever the arbiter of balance between talent and professionalism, was pragmatic. Admiration did not negate disruption. During one rehearsal, Rooney reportedly refused to perform a pre-planned segment unless certain adjustments were made to the camera angles and lighting. Requests that, while not unreasonable, were delivered with such intensity that stagehands and producers struggled to comply in real time. His fame, built over decades, granted him leeway, but Carson and his team recognized that accommodating every whim risked chaos. Carson's response to Rooney was emblematic of his approach to troubled stars. He treated him with dignity and respect on air, acknowledging the brilliance that made him a legend, but privately noted the challenges of collaboration. Rooney's inclusion on the informal blacklist reflected a nuanced understanding. Sometimes a star's personal struggles, no matter how charismatic they appeared, created untenable conditions for the smooth operation of a live show. Carson, ever the arbiter of balance between talent and professionalism, was pragmatic. Admiration did not negate disruption. In essence, Carson's blacklist was an ethical compass, a reflection of his commitment to professionalism, empathy, and the sanctity of live television. These figures, giants in their respective fields, illustrate the complex interplay of talent, ego, and morality in Hollywood's golden age. They also highlight Carson's unique role, not merely a host, but a guardian of standards, quietly curating a balance between entertainment and human decency. Zsa Zsa Gabor, the demanding diva. Zsa Zsa Gabor was the epitome of Hollywood glamour, a name synonymous with luxury, charm, and sophistication. Yet behind the sparkling facade, she could be extraordinarily exacting. According to Carson's notes and staff accounts, Gabor's demands were not just eccentric, they were exhaustive. She would specify lighting angles, seating positions, wardrobe adjustments, and even the precise temperature of the studio. Every detail, from the softness of the couch to the positioning of the microphone, mattered to her. This level of meticulousness had tangible consequences. Production schedules, carefully timed down to the minute for live television, were often delayed. Stagehands and crew had to adjust rapidly to her requests, sometimes leading to tension and behind-the-scenes friction. One story recounts a brief halt in rehearsals, while lighting was reconfigured because the shade didn't flatter my eyes. While minor in isolation, these repeated interruptions tested the patience and coordination of the production team. Carson's response to Gabor was characteristic of his professional poise. On air, he allowed her theatricality to shine, engaging with her glamour and wit, and subtly steering conversation to maintain flow off camera. However, he quietly logged the challenges she presented, noting both her charisma and the logistical strain. Gabor's inclusion on the blacklist reflects Carson's recognition that even charm and fame could not override the practical demands of live television, nor excuse behavior that risked disrupting a team's cohesion. Shelley Winters, the volatile firecracker. Shelley Winters was known for her intensity, a woman whose passion extended beyond acting into politics and public life. On camera, she could be disarmingly candid, her humor sharp, and her insights compelling. Off camera, however, Winters' temper could flare unpredictably, making her a complex guest to manage. According to production notes, her volatility was often intertwined with her political convictions. She would speak fervently on topics ranging from civil rights to Hollywood labor issues, sometimes launching into impromptu monologues that diverged from the show's planned segments. While many guests practiced careful diplomacy, Winter's authenticity came at the cost of predictability. She could charm or unsettle with equal force, leaving assistants and producers balancing admiration with apprehension. Carson, a master of live improvisation, respected Winter's honesty. Unlike Gabber, whose demands were primarily about control and luxury, Winter's disruptions were rooted in conviction and personal intensity. Carson allowed her passion to surface on air, framing it in a way that made the audience both engaged and entertained. Privately, he recognized the potential for friction and noted the need for careful preparation before her appearances. Winter's place on the blacklist, therefore, was not a condemnation of her ethics or brilliance, but a practical acknowledgement. Working with her required vigilance, patience, and readiness for unpredictability. Jane Russell, Beauty and Radical Politics. Jane Russell embodied classic Hollywood beauty, yet her intelligence and political engagement set her apart from many of her contemporaries. While audiences adored her glamorous screen presence, Carson and his staff noticed a sharp contrast behind the scenes. Russell's opinions were often forthright, particularly regarding gender politics and industry practices. She could challenge producers, question assumptions, and offer unsolicited advice about how women should be treated both on and off camera. Unlike Winters, whose volatility was spontaneous, Russell's assertiveness was deliberate and principled. Carson appreciated her authenticity and intellect, but was aware that her candidness could unsettle a show structured for predictable timing and segments. Interviews suggest that she could hold long, impassioned monologues, occasionally diverging from the planned topics. Her interventions, while compelling, sometimes required Carson to skillfully redirect the conversation without undermining her authority or credibility. Russell's inclusion on Carson's blacklist illustrates a recurring theme. Fame and talent did not exempt a guest from scrutiny. In her case, the challenge was not temperament or theatricality, but ideological assertiveness. Carson's judgment was pragmatic. He valued respect, professionalism, and the ability to collaborate within the live television framework. Jane Russell exemplified the tension between individuality and production demands, reminding the Tonight Show team that brilliance sometimes came with friction. Patterns emerging in Carson's blacklist. Examining Gabor, Winters, and Russell together reveals nuanced insights into Carson's approach. Luxury and control versus authenticity. Gabor's demands were about control and aesthetics. Winters' unpredictability stemmed from authenticity and passion. Russell's challenges arose from intellect and advocacy, impact on production. Every type of behavior, whether theatrical, volatile, or principled, required assessment of the real impact on crew, timing, and show flow. Carson's dual lens, public charisma, could mask logistical or interpersonal challenges. He consistently separated admiration from operational reality. Ethical considerations. Fame did not excuse behavior that could demoralize or endanger staff. Carson's blacklist was rooted in ethics as much as in practical concerns. Jerry Lewis, the ego that didn't fit. Jerry Lewis was famous for his boundless energy and physical comedy, a performer whose antics thrilled audiences on screen and stage. Yet behind the camera, this frenetic charm often gave way to a more troubling reality. According to Carson's notes, Lewis frequently interrupted rehearsals, disregarded the timing and structure of the show, and treated staff with little respect. Carson observed that the public persona, funny, generous, seemingly affable, masked a pattern of behavior that could be humiliating to those behind the scenes. Repeated instances of disregard for production rules and crew welfare led Carson to limit or outright veto Lewis's future appearances. Even for a comedic legend, live television demanded discipline, and ego could not override the operational reality of a show airing nightly to millions. In essence, Carson's informal records were a combination of psychological insight and production pragmatism. He recognized patterns of behavior, understood the human element behind the celebrity facade, and created strategies to preserve both the dignity of his guests and the integrity of the show. These three women, each iconic in their own right, exemplified the delicate balance between Hollywood glamour and human complexity that defined the golden era of live television. Johnny Carson's blacklist was more than a list of difficult stars. It was a reflection of his keen insight into human behavior. He could see past glamour, charm, or public persona to the reality behind the facade. While Hollywood often protected celebrity images, Carson's observations highlight the tension between public myth and private truth. In today's era of social media, the contrast is even sharper, reminding us that behind every polished image lies a complex, sometimes flawed human being.